Welcome back to Down and Scaled Replicas. So the Converse Space Shuttlecraft is in the can, so to speak, or in the display case, and now it's all hands on deck to finish up the Predator XP conversions. So both models are in an overall black base coat right now, and the black basing paint technique is really the technique I prefer for these overall monochromatic paint schemes like we're going to have on these two guys here. It's really hard to get a camera angle into the paint booth, but I'm going to try the best I can to video as much of that painting process just to show my approach to that black basing technique. Most of you are probably already familiar with that, but I'll at least show you how I approach it here. Before we get started, don't forget, click subscribe so you can keep up to date on everything that's going on the channel here. Cruise on over to the website, downonscaledreplicas.com. You can see the Predator XP conversion kits there, as well as everything else that we have going on. So with that, let's go ahead, let's get started and wrap up the Predator XP conversions. I'm excited to get back to the XP conversion and finish it up. When we last left, everything was primered in gray, and now I've put down a black base coat using Vallejo Surface Primer and a cocktail of their thinner, their retarder, and their flow improver, trying to get a better overall finish using the airbrush. I still haven't quite figured out all the different ratios here. I have sort of a love-hate relationship with their surface primer. Oftentimes it comes out rough or causes my airbrush to spit, but I'm starting to dial in on how much of the flow improver and the retarder and the thinner I need to get better flow out of the airbrush and a smoother surface on the model itself. Over that base coat, I'm going to be applying MRP's Light Ghost Gray. I'm thinning this just a little bit, and I'm going to spray at a very low pressure, only about 8 or 10 psi. I want to get really in close to the model, and I just want to lay down a lot of squiggly marks here. I think we'd call this a modeling pattern on here. Just sort of trying to create a basic underlayment of a surface that's not a monotone finish, that's still got some unevenness to the overall gray finish. This will be my first pass on this. I'm just going along creating the squiggles on this, trying to create overall some unevenness to this. I'll come back for a second pass now, and what I'm going to be looking for is areas where I feel like I left too much black showing through, so like the leading edge in this case. I'm really going to try to go through and fill in some of that. I'm not trying to create an evenly painted gray surfaces. Again, I want it to be really patchy. I just don't want too many large black surfaces. And I'm also trying to create some additional gray highlights. I want some areas that are highlighted in gray, like they're on the trailing edge near the wing root. Now I'm going to turn to a 50-50 mix of the paint and Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. So this is going to be a really diluted gray coat. I backed up away from the model here, and I'm just doing light coats that are really tinting the color on the model now. So I'm not trying in one pass to cover the entire thing in gray. In fact, I'm not even going to attempt to cover all of the gray. I want that pattern to show through, and you can see here after those first two marbling passes, I'm going through, I think I ended up with about 6 of these tinting passes overall, and I'm just trying to gradually tone down the amount of black on there and raise the amount of gray that's on there, but leave this uneven appearance on the surface. And where you stop is entirely subjective. I tend to stop probably a little early, just leaving more of the black and the unevenness showing through, because there's going to be a lot of other things going on here with panel line washes and decals that are going to distract the eye away from this uneven surface. So I leave a little bit more of it than otherwise you might think might be appropriate. Now it's time to prep the surface for decals, and I need a good clear gloss coat on the model first. So I'm going to experiment with something new I've never used before. It's Ammo's Glossy Lucky Varnish. So let's see how it goes. The surface has been prepped with just a light sanding of 3000 grit sandpaper, and we're ready to go with gloss. And the first coat, oh my gosh, just terrible. So I got a little bit closer than 6 inches and I completely flooded the surface and it just puddled up. It looks terrible and I knew that this was not going to work. So I actually stripped it off just using some water on a damp cotton cloth, and I'm going to go back to the paint booth and try again. I am going to religiously follow the instructions on the bottle and on the website. I'm running at 17 psi. I'm spraying 6 to 8 inches from the part. This is my first light coat. I couldn't get the camera in focus, so going to the second light coat, and you can see I'm making really light passes about 6 to 8 inches away from the surface here. And now I'll pull this up and I'll get it in focus with the camera so you can see what 2 coats of this clear varnish looks like so far, and it's really not encouraging. It's very pebbly. I hope that this settles out. But I have kept going, and now I'm at 8 coats on this one side of the surface, and you can see it's a really pebbly finish. It feels like it might be acceptable for decals, but this is just not the kind of finish that I really would prefer to go forward with. And it's not the kind of finish that I get with my preferred clear gloss, which is a 50-50 mix of Tamiya Clear and Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. So what I'm going to do is, on the flip side of this part, I am going to try again with 8 coats on it because I've got experience under my belt. Maybe that experience will help me get a better result on the flip side of this product. So here I am with the second attempt. I've marked the piece so I know which side is the second side here. I've put 8 coats. I am religiously following the guidance on the bottle and the website. I am 6 inches away from the surface, light passes, spraying this neat with no additives, and it's actually a worse result at this point. I can feel the pebbly surface when I run my fingers over it, and in my experience of modeling decals, decals are going to silver over this finish here. So unfortunately, experience didn't buy me anything on this. I actually have what I feel is a worse result than with my first attempt. Okay, so 8 coats on one side of this, and I think I've got a gloss surface that's acceptable for decals, but another 8 coats on the other surface, and I can feel a pebbly texture. I'm just not going to feel comfortable putting decals on that. In my experience, that almost guarantees that I'm going to have some of them silver. So I guess I've got a few options here. First of all, I could just keep going. Maybe 10 coats, 12 coats, 15 coats, maybe eventually I'll get that second surface to the point where I would feel comfortable putting decals on it. I could change my technique. I could dial down the pressure on the airbrush, get it down to about 10 to 12 psi so I'm not just blasting everything in the vicinity, and maybe get a little bit more control on where I put the gloss and how much I put on there. I could risk flooding the surface if I do that. I don't know. Remember, I did that the first time that I started out with this, so I'm not really confident that I'm going to get the results I want there either. I could just try going over it, see if I put down some of my preferred Tamiya Clear cocktail and salvage the surface that way, or I could just strip it, sand it down, and start over again. Either way, this is really not a position that you want to be in at this place in your model build. But when you decide that you're going to try something new, whether it's a new process, a new method, or a new tool, a new material such as this, I mean, that's the risk you take, right? So you just got to kind of grit your teeth and figure out a recovery plan and move on with it. So that's where I am. Got to figure out what I'm going to do next. Well, so what I decided to do was just add more coats of paint using the same technique. And 6 more coats later, I've got a surface I think I can use here for decals, but I accidentally got a run on both surfaces there. I made one pass a little bit closer than 6 inches and flooded the surface and got those 2 runs. And I put subsequent coats of clear gloss on them, and it doesn't gloss back up, and it has fogged the surface in those 2 areas. So at least I've got something I can put decals on. I think it's time to move on. I'll keep experimenting with this gloss coat on other models, but so far the results have been disappointing. As I mentioned before, the XP is designed to be unarmed and to be an export version of the Predator. Now, I think that they have sold a few to the UAE. I haven't heard of any other countries yet that they've sold some to, so I'm just conjecturing that they could go, for example, to the Turkish Air Force and to the Royal Jordanian Air Force. So I worked up some decals based on what I see them marking their F-16s as shown here in the photos. A combination of flags and roundels and numbers on the vertical and horizontal surfaces. It looks like the Royal Jordanian Air Force does roundels on both the upper and lower surfaces of both wings, whereas Turkey kind of follows the American example. Upper, let's see, what is it? That's port side and lower starboard side, and then forward fuselage roundels plus the flag on the tail. So worked out some decals as well as white backing for those decals, and we'll just begin to go ahead and get those onto the surface of the models. I made some posts on social media this week talking about my experiences using the Lucky Gloss varnish here. And one of the responses was someone claiming that this stuff is not even intended to be used as a gloss coat prior to decaling, and that decal setting solutions and even possibly weathering solutions would eat right through this, ruining the finish on the model. So that got me interested enough, I started doing some research online. And sure enough, I found some other posts on other modeling forums that seem to substantiate that this stuff is intended as a finishing coat, like a top coat, the very last thing that you would do on a model. Although why you would ever use it that way, I don't know, because my experience is it just creates a terrible orange peel effect on the model. But anyway, there are enough posts out there online from folks who have used this and decaled and weathered over it, and it has ruined their finish, that it seems to substantiate that claim that that's not what this is intended for. Now, I've looked all over the manufacturer's website, I've watched their YouTube videos. The only thing that I can find is there is a decaling video out there where they use aerogloss to gloss coat the surface, then decal, weather, and then put this on as the last thing. That seems to indirectly substantiate that this is not intended to be used as a gloss coat prior to decaling or preparing the surface for weathering. So that's really frustrating, because it's one thing to experiment and to not have that work out. It's sort of a risk you take when you decide you're going to try something new, when you're looking for a better alternative. But to find out that something isn't even intended for that purpose, and the manufacturer just neglects to tell you this, and in the process you pretty much ruin a model, I mean, that's inexcusable. And to me, that has created a great deal of frustration for me. So for me, this stuff, it's going in the trash. It's never getting close to one of my models again. It's just not worth it. There are too many other products out there that are superior to that junk to even experiment with it. You know, again, my preference is Tamiya X22 50/50 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. It goes on beautiful, levels out, a smooth, glossy surface. The Aerogloss, so this is the acrylic version of their gloss coat. Again, put it on neat, no additives, light layers. It's going to level out beautifully, and it gives you a really great gloss surface over which to decal and weather. It's impervious to any of the setting solutions I use or any of the weathering effects that I've used. So my recovery plan was originally to try to just gently wet sand with 3000 grit sanding paper, at least those few spots on the model that are going to require decals, to at least get rid of that orange peel as much as I could before I overcoat it with aqua gloss. And I said aerogloss, I should have said aqua gloss. That's the acrylic, or the acrylic version of that. But I began to just gently do that, and I immediately went through that Lucky Gloss varnish and began getting down into the paint color itself. So I stopped that immediately, and then I noticed there were some little milky white crumblies and film that was beginning to develop on the surface. And with a wet finger, I just started to rub at those, and that Lucky Gloss varnish just started peeling up off of it. It's so delicate, even just a wet finger. And this has been 48 hours since I put this stuff down, 8 coats of this stuff, and it just started peeling up with a wet finger. Unfortunately, what I ended up with was this really patchwork, terrible looking surface where some of it came off, some of it refused to come off. I blotted everything down and dried it with a clean cotton cloth after that. I came back 2 hours later, and now I've got this patchwork all over the model where some areas have bleached or fogged. They've got this milky white,
appearance on them. I don't know what in the world is going on. It doesn't come off. I've even tried using like Windex to take it off. I've rubbed it again with my finger. It has just destroyed the paintwork on the surface of the model. I mean, it's terrible. It's a disaster in the making. I will tell you what I have done is I have just kind of gone back in those areas and almost started from scratch. I went ahead and put down some light black in those patchwork areas where it just turned a milky white. I then have gone back over, done the marbling with the light gray and done the tinting again with the light gray. It doesn't all blend in. It kind of gives it the effect maybe of even areas where it's been weathered. I mean, it'll be okay. It's not great. It's definitely not what I wanted to have, but it's enough so that I can go ahead and move on. And I've coated everything with the aqua gloss now, which went on beautifully. Should have just stuck with that. Should not have experimented with that that ammo glossy Lucky Varnish nonsense. But you know, that's the risk you take. I wish the manufacturer would be truthful about what it's intended for and what it's not intended for, because I never would have gotten myself into this situation had I known that. And I have found enough posts online from enough different modelers that a lot of people have gotten into the same situation. In some cases, they've ruined their model because they just didn't understand that that was the intent of that Lucky Gloss varnish. So a lot of frustration that didn't need to happen here, but I've learned a lot. I hope maybe you've learned something here so you can avoid the same mistakes. And at this point, it's time to move on and go ahead and finish things up with the decals.
It can be difficult to get white decals in register with full color decals. So I've printed those separately from the full color decals. So the first thing I do is put down the underlaying white decals just the same way you put down color decals, with decal set and solution. And after those have dried for a few hours, now I'm ready to put down the color decals. As you can see, I'm really focused on getting them lined up perfectly with that white decal that's underneath, and that contributes to that center white stripe in the flag as well as the white star that's there on the red pennant. Blot that down, and then once that has been on there for about half an hour and it's good and set, I begin to put the numbers on. This is the Royal Jordanian markings here. So those are the numbers. They do print their numbers using Arabic script. So I've got those on there. I think I just picked 231 randomly. That's what that number is. Over on the wings, the white roundel has gone down, and now on top of that I'm putting the colored roundel, and again I'm really just going to be focused on making sure that I get these lined up perfectly so there's no white peeking out from behind the edges of that decal, and I only see it there in the center and then the star on that pennant. One of these XP models is going to be posed as if it's in flight, and I like to have a spinning prop effect when I pose a model in flight. So what I've done here is, using my laser cutter, I cut a disc out of 1/16 inch thick clear acrylic. It's actually a picture frame which you can get relatively inexpensively at a craft store, and it makes for a really nice clean cut, plus I can get that hole exactly centered on the disc for mounting onto the model. And I figured out a really cool trick. I can chuck this disc then into my Dremel tool, and while it's spinning I can just touch it with some 600 grit sandpaper and give it a really nice spinning effect as well too. Then I'll mount it on the spinner or the hub or whatever I may happen to have for that particular model, and I think overall it gives it a little bit more convincing effect for a model that's in flight. On the in-flight article, there is a representation of retracted landing gear. Frankly, you can't see a whole lot when they are retracted, so this is more to give you a sense that there is something there than necessarily to be 100% accurate. Even in museums, I've tried to look up into these gear bays when they're retracted, and it's extremely difficult to see anything in there. And among the final details are to get the tails on the birds as well too. Now, there are not really terribly affirmative locating points on the aircraft there. There's one very, very small pin. It's easy to break. It's enough to get it in there, but the angle, like I said, is really not all that affirmative. And in fact, on one of these, I got the angle really, really bad. I need to go back and fix it. It's not well aligned right now. But that's one of the last things that you need to do, is get these guys on there, and it's just about going to wrap it up at this point. I haven't said anything about the display base on the in-flight article. I think I've shown this before on previous videos on my painting process for taking the raw 3D printed base and then doing a multicolor paint scheme on it. I do an underlayer of lacquer, and in this case it's going to be the white and the gray, and then come back over that again with the blue. So it makes a really nice fill-in detail on the base and just something to give it a little bit more visual interest when you display the model on it. And man, once again, that wraps up another set of models. That's fantastic. And in fact, with all the problems I had with that gloss coat on the one that has a landing gear on it here, these just needed to be done, if you know what I mean. There's a few alignment problems I really need to go back and fix, and a little details that I didn't go through and complete, but you know, for the moment, they just need to be done. They'll sit on the shelf for a month or so. Maybe I'll go back and fix those little nitpicks, but for right now, I'm just really happy to have the two of these complete. And I'm glad that I could show off this wing conversion kit there for those who do want to have one of the Predator XP export versions that do have the winglets, and if you wanted to show one in flight as well too, I'm really happy with the way that that wing set came out, as well as the retracted landing gear. So thank you so much again for joining me for yet another build. I'm really happy to have these complete here. I'm proud of the way that they turned out. I hope that you've enjoyed going through this as well too, and I hope that you'll consider taking a look at this wing conversion set on my website. Thanks again. We'll see you again soon.